For most of you, it might be the first time that you'll get to know about the stock market, and I only hope that you find it as interesting as I did. Moving on to our speaker for the webinar, please welcome Shreya Gupta, a senior associate consultant at Infosys. She is an experienced functional consultant for a British multinational consumer goods company in the space of health and hygiene with a demonstrated history of working in the information technology and service industry, currently into the emerging technology of blockchain practice. She is a strong consulting professional with a Master of Business Administration focused on finance from Symbiosis International University and BTech from University of Pune. Ma'am, we are honored to have you among us. So, without further ado, I would like to invite our esteemed speaker to put forth her views.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Ananya. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. So, do we have a chat window for the audience to probably connect with me, or that's not available here?
Okay, ma'am. So what we have done is, first you can carry out whatever you have, a presentation or some points that you want to share, and
Hmm.
later on, what we did was, when we circulated the registration form, we asked students to put their queries in it. So I have those questions with me, and then later we'll have a Q&A round. So you can
Okay.
answer those questions. Those are directly by the students.
Okay. All right. So should we wait for people to join, or shall I start right now?
No, ma'am, you can start. We have
Okay.
waited for like 10 minutes. So.
All right. Okay, so a very good morning to everybody attending this session today on stock market, and a very happy Diwali as well. Uh, I must say that I'm very heartened to see such a good participation even on a holiday like Diwali during a festive season. And I was hoping to have a good interactive session, but I'm sure the Q&A round will make up for it. Um, Before I start, I would have liked to know how many of you currently invest in the stock market. But assuming that this will be a learning experience for all of you, so we'll start and we'll basically focus on all the basic terminologies and the very basics of stock market, totally in a layman language. Okay, and before I start, I would like to put across a small thought for all of you. In our entire educational tenure that we go through, we emphasize a lot on academic subjects like math and science and English language. It's all to basically prepare us for the future coming ahead, right? But what saddens me is that we give little to no importance to something that sticks on with us right till the end of our existence, which is financial literacy. And don't you think it is important to know the significance of savings and investments, how to manage our money intelligently, and basically inculcate a habit of having goals set in our mind so that we can work towards it slowly and steadily? So let's do an exercise. Maybe it's a personal one, but we all have our bucket list, right? Something that we want to do, something that we want to achieve. So it could be anything, like an international trip that we might want to take, or maybe a kick-ass PlayStation that we want to buy, or just some kind of small goals that we keep for us. I just feel that why do we have to wait till the time we start earning to work or act upon it? Why not start smaller but sooner? So anyway, not right away maybe, but I hope today's session probably gives you that seed for thought, so that you can think more on this topic. Before having said that, I would like to share my screen so that I can present the presentation for today's session. Please let me know once you can see my screen.
Your screen is visible, ma'am.
It's visible. Okay, good. All right. So, talking about the basics of stock market, I have put in one of the many famous quotes by Warren Buffett, saying that the stock market is basically a device for transferring the money from the impatient to the patient. I'm not sure if this makes sense to you right now, but basically, stock market is all about long-term investments. What is misconceived at the moment is that it's a place for short-term gains, and hence the people who lose their money is usually the impatient ones who try and get out of the market at short intervals, and the ones who stick on for a long time are the ones who end up getting a very enriching experience. So this slide summarizes the agenda for today. We'll basically, before talking about stock market, we'll be focusing a little bit about the significance of investments and the different types of investment opportunities that are there in currently in the Indian market. So I feel that before we understand the stock market, we should also understand why we have to invest and not just keep our money idle. And I would have probably gotten some inputs from you guys on why did you think that we need to invest and save. But let me talk about it. So I feel that when we start earning or we have money to spend, we don't always give importance to savings and investments right away. By the time our parents go after us asking that, have you started saving something? Are you investing somewhere? And we can't finally avoid them anymore. We basically have lost good chunk of our time. And as you know, time is money, right? So I feel that right from if we inculcate a habit of saving and investing, we will not delay and lose time, especially in this youthful tenure. So, talking about time value of money, like people say that time is money, right? You understand how the value of money today will not be the same tomorrow. It will keep on decreasing day by day. And why do you think that happens? Because of something called inflation, or in simple terms, uh, mehengai. Anything that costs maybe a rupee right now might cost 10 in the coming future. Like a simple samosa might be costing just 10 bucks right now, but it costed a rupee 10 years back, right? So if supposingly we keep that 100 rupees in our piggy bank that we have, and we keep it on for another 10 years, it'll still remain 100 bucks. But will it be as significant as it is right now? No. So that is why it is very important for us to keep growing our money and not let it be idle. So here I've listed down some of the reasons why people save and invest: to have emergency funds, of course, to grow your capital, and majorly once you start working, you save and invest for your retirement, right? Because you don't want to keep on working all your life. You want to reach a level of financial independence eventually. So that is the major reason why people end up saving money and investing it, so that it keeps on growing. Money works for itself. And of course, once you reach the income tax brackets, you always tend to save, do some tax savings, because who wants to give money to the government, right? When you can keep it for yourself. So you might not be able to use it right away, but at least you're not spending it on taxes. So going forth, here I've listed out some of the investment opportunities that we currently have. There are many more, but I've listed out some of the basic ones. So broadly, we can categorize them into 4 or 5 investment opportunities. And what we can divide them into is the amount of capital that is required, the return on the investment that we get, how much risk is involved, what is the tenure for which we have to invest, and liquidity. I hope you guys understand what liquidity is. It basically means just how readily available that money is for spending. So, if we look at something like real estate and gold, these are very capital intensive investment opportunities. You need a lot of money to start investing in them. And you can never be sure of the kind of returns that you get in these investments. So, these are for a kind of later stage in your life. PPF again is something of a retirement scheme that will happen as and when you start working. What we can look at right now at this stage of your lives is probably fixed deposits and equity market. Broadly speaking, these are not as capital intensive as the others that I've mentioned. The return on investment in fixed deposits are obviously fixed, and in a savings account it might be approximately 3 to 5%, whereas in a fixed deposit it may stretch over to 5 to 7%. But then again, it's a percentage of the capital that you invest, and there is little to no risk involved, but the return is relatively small in comparison to equity, wherein, of course, there is risk. But that is what we're going to talk about today, how we can minimize the risk with potential knowledge that we can gain on equity market. And obviously, we are at a stage of our lives where we can afford to take the risk. We do not have very many responsibilities, so to say, in our lives right now. So we can, and also we have a very big factor in our favor, which is time. We're starting off early, right? Generally people start once they reach the age of earning. So in those terms, and talking about liquidity as well, the equity market does not lock in your money, unlike a PPF account or a fixed deposit for which the tenure is blocked. So you can at any moment sell your equity and get your money back. So in terms of liquidity, of course, the direct equities is a potential investment opportunity. Okay, so talking about what are the constraints why people stay away from stocks. Even though they're interested in this space, they do not feel that they have the expertise to grow. And I feel like at this stage of our lives, we have enough time to dwell on the knowledge to understand the investments that are involved in stock market. But obviously, provided we give that time and effort into it. And I feel you guys attending this session is just another baby step towards the same. So you've taken that step, so that's good. So of course, then there are people who do not want to risk their money. Of course, the risk comes into picture when you are blindly throwing judgments over stocks without really studying them. And those are the people who also feel that it's a scam because they invest for short term, and obviously the market can sway anyway in short term, because without knowledge and without seeing the trends and exactly what kind of factors influence the market, it's not the right process to get involved in the stock market. And then, of course, there are other reasons wherein people do not have enough liquidity in terms of money to invest in something like stocks. They would rather go for more safer investments so that they don't lose their money without the expertise, of course. Talking about the myths. So there is this obvious myth. The biggest is that the stock market is basically a quick way to earn returns, and of course it's a gamble. But effectively, if you look at it from a long term perspective, like if you have long term strategies, then you invest in the stocks, not to gamble. You have studied the company fundamentals, and you understand the business. That's when you invest in a particular company, and in the long term it will give you unimaginable returns. So whenever you look into anything which is very quick and fast, it will not always benefit you. And gambling all obviously comes into picture if you feel if you basically invest in something without really knowing about much about it, just based on somebody's suggestions or stock tips and all those kind of things. I'm sure you guys must have seen the recent TV series on Harshad Mehta, The Scam. And if at all I can relate this to what happened there, was also the same. So generally, people relied on Harshad to give them the stock tips, and they blindly invested in those stocks, wherein he was probably just inflating the price of that particular stock. That might, in one of the scenes, they also show that the companies whose price was getting inflated did not even have a proper office space. So things like this make people lose faith in the stock market. So we'll talk more about how it this faith is tried to build has been built ever since those times. And also, of course, there is, it's not an all rosy picture. There is a decent amount of risk in markets as well. And hence that is why it is important that we understand the very fundamentals of anything that we're investing in. So this is basically a step forward in for you to understand exactly how can you proceed once you start investing in the stock market. What should be your thought process? What should be your strategy or ideology while investing? And the myth that you need a lot of money is probably another wrong notion, because in any of the investment uh, opportunities that we discussed before, you need a sizable amount of capital. But in equities, you can start investing with as much as a single share costs, and shares can cost from anything between 3 rupees to thousands. A single share can cost thousands of money as well, and it can also cost just a single rupee or two. So also, I forgot to mention, I feel that when we're studying about the stock market, we should also dwell on some of the iconic Indian stock market players that we have seen. And I feel that whenever we're starting to learn something new about a particular topic, we should also look at the successful stories of the people who have uh, made it in this field. So we look into one such person, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. He is called the Indian Warren Buffett, or the King of Dalal Street. So he basically started investing very early on, just when the BSE, or Bombay Stock Exchange as they call it, started in the 1800s as well itself. He started with an investment of just 5,000 at the moment. Of course, 5,000 was not very less during those times also. But considering that his current net worth is $3.1 billion, is quite unimaginable, considering he is only a chartered accountant, right? And how do you think he reached such massive scales of wealth? Obviously, he has worked upon studying, in this field, understanding the various nuances of the stock market. And obviously, he had the a very initial advantage of going into it very early on, when the growing companies were very cheap in the market. He obviously understood where the Indian market was growing, and invested accordingly for long term. With that kind of vision and knowledge and patience, of course, something that, trust me, is not very easy to have. And I'm talking about this from personal experience. It's very difficult to have the patience to stick on with a particular stock, even when you see sizable returns in your initial investment. But just to stick around for a longer period of time, the amount of returns that you get is compounded like extremely high. It's very difficult to really understand that without experiencing it yourself. uh, just give me a minute, I get back to you. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. I'm so sorry about that. So, as I was saying, talking about Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, he is one of the most iconic Indian stock market players, and I think you should read more about him and how he achieved this sizable amount of wealth in these few decades in the stock market. Going further, now finally, we shall start with the stock market basics. So here is a list of what you can expect in the coming slides. We'll understand what basically shares are, what investment income is. Like up until now, we know what interest income is, right? Now we need to understand how do we get returns from making these investments. What is a private company versus a public company, and what is a listed and a non-listed company. Obviously, we'll discuss at length about the Indian stock market and what is a market index and why is it required, what kind of trades that we can make, and how can you guys start investing in the stock market. If we have the time, maybe I'll also show you guys a live trade from my account. Okay. um, what are shares? Now, it basically refers to ownership of the company. What do you think is the primary resource for any business or company? It's the capital or the money, right? Without which you can't really start anything. So usually for money, we go to banks and we get a loan, but then we have to pay interest income on it, right? So what if instead of paying that interest income, we give a part ownership of the business or company in exchange for capital? Now, this is the ownership that is referred to as shares. I'd like to take example of Infosys to explain this more clearly. See, Infosys was started by 7 engineers with an initial capital of 10,000 rupees. That was almost $250 at that time, and they all became equal partnership in that company at that time. So whatever they earned in terms of business particular year, the entire amount, barring that 10,000 expense cost that they had, was the profit that they could equally share amongst themselves. Of course, that is not how companies generally work, because apart from apart from investing in like getting returns, giving returns back to the shareholders, you also want to reinvest the money back into your business, right? Now they might want to get a proper office space, get more resources, maybe hire people on salary so that they can work with more clients, get more business, earn more revenue. That's how a company progresses, right? So what shares provide is basically the share of profit that a company gets at the end of an annual year or a financial year, and that profit ideally is for the shareholders. But then again, if you want the company to progress, you put it back in the business and grow it, right? So I'd like to focus here on comparison of what interest income holds and what dividend income holds. What basically is a dividend income? This share of profit that you get at the end of a financial year from the company's revenue is referred to as dividend, which is then given to the shareholders. Uh, all but interest income is compulsory. Like no bank can end up saying that, oh, sorry, we did not earn enough this year, so we will not be able to give you your interest income. No, they have to give you that fixed percentage of the capital that you invested with them. And also that interest income is not tax free. Supposingly you invest in a fixed deposit or bonds for that matter, the amount of income over and above your capital that you get will be considered will be considered in the tax bracket as per your like wherever you fit in the tax brackets of the country. But on the other hand, dividend income, though it's optional to give you the dividend income, they might invest all of their profits back into their business. But then it's up to you whether you want to stay invested in that company or not. Then again, why companies would do that is because they feel that the amount of returns that they can give the shareholders in terms of direct dividends is and how much they will be able to build their own company. Google, for instance, has never given any dividends to their shareholders with the same ideology that they feel that they can provide a higher level of growth even to the shareholders in comparison to giving them a dividend. So, what would you have, for instance, what would you have wanted if supposingly at the end of a financial year, Google pays $10 per share annually to their shareholders, but if they invest the same capital in their own business, they end up getting a $300 increase in their share price over the year. So what wouldn't you want them to not give dividends and rather invest in their own money in their own company? So but then again, there are a few companies who want the shareholders to stay invested with them, due to which they give a certain amount of dividend income to their shareholders. Some companies are known for that. That is why people invest in those companies. A part of their income is the dividend income, and considering it is tax free, it becomes an added benefit for them. Okay, so now continuing with the Infosys example, as of now, Infosys is a private company, right? They have only 7 of those shareholders, and maybe, of course, they incorporated more shareholders. Maybe they involved the employees, they gave them stock options, employee stock options, wherein they give part ownership of the Infosys shares to them as their salary, in their salary. This also helps them put in more efforts to build in the value of their own company. So that was initially the reason why ESOPs or employee stock options were given to their employees. So, but still, it's remained a private company up until 1992, when they went for listing in the stock market. But before listing in the stock market, a private company needs to become a public company. So here I've listed out some of the differences between a private and a public company. There are constraints in terms of the number of shareholders that a private company can have. And of course, there are very less compliances that a private company needs to adhere to. When any company becomes a public company, it is under much more scrutiny than a private company. They have to be more open about their financials, where all they are investing, what are their different revenue streams, and all of those have to be open for a a public company. Now again, a public company may not be listed on the stock exchange. So if again now this public company wants to get listed on the stock exchange, it releases something called the initial public offering. Initial public offering is basically when a company is in the need for a large amount of capital. So for their business, they want to grow at an exponential level. They are already established, and at that time in 1992, when Infosys issued their shares for the initial public offering, they one thing I forgot to mention here was the dividend income is basically a percentage of the face value of the share. Now, what is the face value of the share? Face value of the share is the price of the share at the very beginning of the initiation of the company. Like when those 7 engineers started the company, they put the face value of the share at 10 rupees per share. So effectively, with 10,000 capital, they had a total share count of 1,000 shares. So this face value that they started off with was 10 rupees. But when they issued the IPO, they issued the IPO at the price of 95, which was at a premium price of 85, right? So basically at that time, it was not, there was nothing at that point of time. But when they released the IPO or issued the IPO, they were an established company, right? So they issued the price at a premium pricing of 95. But then again, it was not fully subscribed, in the sense not everybody opted for their shares. So in the IPO, you release a certain number of shares in the stock market, and you people like you and I can opt to buy them. But since the price is fixed here, it is not a sure shot thing that if we apply for it, we will get those shares. There's basically a lottery system wherein some people get the shares, some people don't. Up until the listing day, you don't get to know whether you've actually got the shares or not. So okay, sorry. So having covered what an IPO is and what a public and a private company is, what is this interest and dividend income, let's head to some of the terms that are used for a particular stock. We know what a face value is now. Market price is the price at which it is trading on the stock exchange. These are some of the terms that are used in the stock market terminology: last traded price or the current market price. The issue price is the price at which it issues in the IPO of any company which opts for listing in the stock exchange. And of course, the difference between the day the company issues its stocks to the day it lists on the stock exchange is roughly about 7 to 8 days. So there is a good possibility of the listing price being massively different from the issue price. For instance, when Infosys got listed in 1993 June, it got listed at almost a 50% upside of 145 rupees. So all the people who invested in the stock actually within a few days got a short return of 50% on the capital that they invested. So of course there are limitations of how much money you can put in when the company issues a IPO. But then again, this pricing, the listing pricing is the price at which it gets listed on the stock exchange. Of course, we'll talk about what happens at the time of listing and how does the price get determined. Before that, this is Radhakishan Damani. He's another one of India's iconic stock market, success stories. He is mostly known as the founder and promoter of DMart. I'm sure you all know about. He was initially not into the stock market at all. He had his own business of ball bearing, and he was a BCom dropout. But can you believe it? Even though he had such a late start to the stock market, he ended up becoming a mentor to Rakesh Jhunjhunwala himself. And in comparison, his net worth is way, way more, $14.3 billion. So even for Mr. Damani, his strategy was very simple. He would invest for long terms, at least 5 to 10 years. And he always looked at the future prospects of the company before investing. And of course, looking at the fundamentals of a company, a product, for a company's product having a uh, potential in the future, and all those things. So, talking about DMart, uh, for a long period of time, he invested in a lot of companies, and with their success, even he became very successful. He earned a lot of money, but he was not so happy because he did not have anything of his own. That is why he went to the States and learned the entire business model of Walmart, and came back in 2002 and started DMart as something on the similar lines. On In 2017, I think DMart issued its IPO, which was at a starting price of 299, but at the listing day, it's one of the most impressive stories in IPO history. Is in the recent times, of course, that it got listed at more than 100% upside. It almost got listed at 600 or something. So many a times people invest in IPOs also because you tend to get a very high percentage of return in a very short span of time, in the form of listing gains. But then you can't always be sure of how things turn out at that very time. I would like to share a personal example about how SBI cards, when it was coming for an IPO, it was very highly rated, and it got oversubscribed. There were so many people who wanted to get SBI cards, and there was a very there were news of it like opening really high from the listing price as well. But obviously, not everybody got the opportunity to have those shares. Uh, Unfortunately, right before the listing day, the news of the pandemic hit the entire world. So the stock markets crashed like anything. And, unfortunately, that hit the pricing of the company as well. So it listed at a discounted price from its issue price. So such things also happen. You never know how investors perceive a particular stock. So if there is a lot of demand for a particular stock, in its price is bound to increase. But then if it's not so sought after, so many times the entire amount that a company issues for subscription for an IPO do not get bought by investors. So they end up opening either at the same issue price or at a much more discount. But eventually, if you think about it from a company perspective, SBI Cards was obviously a massive company. It is a subsidiary of India's largest bank, public sector bank. So it has obviously has enormous potential. Uh, Even though initially people were at a disadvantage of getting the shares, but eventually now it has much well recovered, and in spite of the pandemic, the price has risen and grown. So going further from here. Okay, now finally, let's talk about the Indian Stock Exchange. So, what is any market for that matter? It is a place where you can buy and sell things, right? So, in simple terms, stock market is also a place where you buy and sell stocks. Now that you understand what a share or a stock is, you can understand how this functions, right? So, all these public listed companies' shares are listed on these stock exchanges. BSE and NSE are basically two different types of markets which are part of the Indian stock exchange, stock market. They are two different markets. So BSE is obviously the oldest one, which started in 1875, back in the days when there were paper trades that were happening. As if you remember how trading was happening in the Harshad Mehta series as well, everybody would gather around in that space, and they would make the trades. Whoever wants to buy or sell at a certain price, they had to make there and then they had to make the receipt and give it to them. So that's how trading used to happen during that time. And obviously it is it's one of the oldest stock exchanges in Asia also, in fact. So, and it's also called the Dalal Street because the Bombay Stock Exchange is located at the Dalal Street in Mumbai. So, just some trivia. Uh, so now in 1992, when the NSE got founded, it introduced to India the advanced electronic trading system. So because things were electronic now, they had moved on from the whole paper-based settlement system, on which everything was happening on paper. It made it very easy for people to invest in this stock exchange, and it had a better reach, and functioning wise it was faster, and there were just so many benefits in digitalizing the entire practice, that it ended up becoming one of the it's actually the largest currently the largest stock exchange in India. So yeah, so I would also like to bring here the fact that up until 1996, I think, the shares were not traded in electronic form but in physical form, like a share certificate. It contained the name of the person, the number of shares, and the company, and all those factors. But eventually, as and when the electronic system started, all these physical shares had to be dematerialized, as the term says, into and listed in our demat account. This is something that you guys must have heard. Our trading account is also called demat account, and the reason for it is this terminology, that all the paper stocks were dematerialized to form electronic shares that were listed in our demat account. Does that mean that you all might need a demat account to start trading? Well, yes. So we'll talk more about that. But let's look at the operation mechanism of how stock exchanges function. They have a fixed timing from 9:15 to 3:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, because obviously it's happening at such a large scale that there has to be some standardization, right? And the trades being settled at T+2, what it means is, if we make a trade today today being the T day, then it'll take 2 more working days or market working days for it to come and show in our demat account. Okay, this is just something that you should know, because you shouldn't panic the next day when it suddenly disappears, and you can see it. There's a different place where you can see those accounts which are not there in your demat yet. So they have like a T+1 holding place where you can see the account. And does that mean that you can't sell a share after on the T+1 day? No, you can sell your share. It just won't show in the demat account just yet. And of course, another very important thing is that you can't directly trade changes to happen through a broker. There has to be a middle person. And obviously, for stock market regulations, SEBI, or Securities and Exchange Board of India, is responsible. And right around the time the Harshad Mehta scam happened, the SEBI was established and as an independent authority. Okay, so going forth, we'll try and understand now what is a market index and why is it required in the first place. So we understand, right, that there are two stock exchanges. Majorly, there are two stock exchanges, the BSE and the NSE. But what a market index shows us is basically gives us an idea of the economy of our country. There are so many stocks or companies listed in these stock exchanges. How will we understand exactly how is it performing? We can't keep looking at all different stocks and understand which is going up, which is going down. Is it a good time to invest or not? Right. So what a market index does is basically gives you an understanding of the situation, the market situation altogether. And how does it do it is like Sensex includes the top 30 shares which are listed in the BSE. How do we categorize the top 30 is by market capitalization. Now, what is market capitalization? It's, in simple words, it's this total number of shares which are trading in the market into the current market price. So using that, the exchange has like brought down 30 top companies that they like sort of make a weighted average of and give it as the Sensex value. So if we see the Sensex going up or down, we understand that the major companies across different industries are together moving up or moving down. So that gives us a very fair sense of judgment on how the market is performing. Here in Sensex, there are top 30 companies which are part of the Sensex, whereas for Nifty 50, there are the top 50 stocks that are trading in the NSE exchange, which are representative of what Nifty 50 shows. So to elaborate these stocks listed in the exchange, sometimes these indexes are also with respect to a particular industry. Like here, it's across industries, right? Sensex 30, Nifty 50 is across industries. But some indexes like indices like Bank Nifty will be respective to all the banks which are currently trading in the NSE stock exchange. So the top banks would form the index called Bank Nifty. So then again, we'll get an idea of how that is performing over the past few days. In fact, for talking from recent days, the Bank Nifty was really going like breaking records for the past few market days that we could see. So that's how we know that all the banks in the stock exchange were performing really well in terms of their share prices, right? So I think we have a fair understanding of what a stock exchange is, what is BSE, what is NSE, how trading is done, why is a market, and what does it signify, right? Um, Then now we'll look at some of the trades that happen in while investing or trading in the stock exchange. There are two types of trades: a delivery trade or an intraday trade. If you make the buy sell of a particular stock on the same day, then that is called intraday trading. And if you buy a stock and you hold it for more than a day, then it's called a delivery trade. And what is different is the brokerage charges that different stockbrokers might be charging may be different for these kind of trades. So, but then again, these days, because of all the digitalization, there are stockbrokers who charge very minimal brokerage charges, almost nil. So that might really not matter. But okay, so like I wanted to explain, not all of us have the time and energy to actually sit down and understand. We don't even have the knowledge or expertise to understand companies' financials, right? But there are some industries which are very common sense based, and you can easily understand from basic terminologies or basic profit and loss understanding of any company for that matter. So I thought we could look into one such company. Also, like one of the myths that we had discussed was that you need a lot of money, right, to invest in a particular stock. There's also a myth that huge companies, like, you know, big sized companies do not give you much returns, which is not true. You really need to see exactly how brilliantly they perform across a long term, you know, long tenure, something like a 5 or 10 year tenure. They give you returns, easily give you returns of more than 20 to 30% on your initiated capital. So we'll look at one such company called Britannia. Whenever you analyze the financials of any company, you should try and take the last 5 years numbers to visualize, because no company will give you like an understanding within a years of performance. Usually for establishing or to building a trend, you require at least 5 to 10 years of understanding of how the business is performing. Something like Britannia being an FMCG company, it basically has a very large product line in a very common space, something like biscuits and cakes and dairy products. All of this is prevalent in every household, right? You can't do without these things. And the sheer value at which these get circulated in an economy is massive. Is there any depth for their products? How Britannia is such a well-known brand that you would probably take any new product coming from that company, even if they're trying something new out, just for the sake of trying it, considering that is the kind of brand recognition that brand Britannia enjoys, right? Having said that, if you look at it from a purely number perspective and look at the numbers from 2015 to 2019, we look at the turnover value. What turnover basically means is the revenue that they create. These are basically the profit and loss values of the company's financial statements. So here in turnover, we get the revenue uh, of a of a company, right? Does this revenue mean profit? No. Revenue, we'll have to subtract any of the expenses that the company might have undergone to get, be it in terms of the raw material or the marketing or the manufacturing or the sales. There are just so many expenses involved, right? So once from the revenue, if you subtract all the expenses that a company must have taken up to sell these products, we get what is profit before tax. Of course, uh, taxation is something of an expense as well, which has to be given to the government, right? So essentially, what matters to us is the profit after tax. So, in terms of market lingo, this turnover being at the top of the financial statement is also called the top line, and profit after tax being at the bottom of the financial statement is also called the bottom line. So, over these years, these 5 years, just take a moment and just understand exactly how is the trend going. Is it increasing gradually? As you can see, it was 7, 72, 100, and all these values are in crores, by the way. So from 7200 to 7800 to 85 to 92 to 10, it is increasing per year, right? And so is the profit before tax. So as you can see, we can't see any massive increase in their expenses because the profit before tax is also increasing quite linearly, similar to how it is in the it can be seen in the turnover, right? So something where if you visualize any financial wherein you see that even though the turnover is increasing but the profit before tax is not increasing as much, that only means that the expenses of the company are also increasing for whatever reasons. Then again, that needs further investigation, right? But at the moment, we can see that the profit before tax and of course the tax after tax is also increasing linearly. So this is a very good performance in terms of companies financials, if you see, and the same can be seen reflecting in their share price as well, right? It has been gradually increasing. And if you understand exactly how much gain this is from 1,000 rupees per share to a 3,000 rupees per share within a span of 5 years, it's more than 100% gain, right? Is it possible in any other financial instrument that we studied before in the beginning of the presentation? I don't think so. So, and is it a very safe company to invest in? It's an established company. Is it very expensive to invest in? 1,000 rupees at, of course, in 2015. So, in terms of talking about all the aspects of investment, it qualifies for a very good investment model, right? So this is how basically you have to understand how a company is performing and stay invested in it for a period of and of course you don't have to invest just like one time altogether, just enter in 2015 and then just sort of take a setback. There are good companies wherein you understand and believe in the companies, but of course because of various unimaginable um, market conditions, the stock prices obviously get influenced. Like we spoke about the stock price of share price of SBI cards, right? Now, there was nothing wrong in the company at the moment, but with the news of the pandemic, there was obviously a scare everywhere in the world, in India, of course, that the economy was going for a downhill phase, and obviously it did affect of it surely affected our economy as we saw in the numbers in the post quarters. But then again, as and when the recovery will happen, the very fact that the company's basic or fundamentals remains the same will ensure that it will grow eventually in the long run, right? So we have to that is what we have to understand about any company when we invest in them. So, for example, at that time, uh, after the pandemic, the market crashed massively. But of course, within just a span of 6 to 7 months, we have recovered and gone beyond the levels that we were in the pre-pandemic time. So, how has this happened? It's happened because there is positive news going around about the vaccines coming out, right? So that sort of builds a positive response at the end of from a investor perspective. We know that once the vaccine is out, things will come back to how they were initially. The businesses and the industries will revive. All of these aspects build a positive impact, and that is what is driving the market right now. Right. And as we can see, with festive season, people coming out, they're uh, of course it's not very good for our situation still, under COVID. But then again, there has been a lot of increase in economic activity ever since the lockdown got removed. So uh, I hope I got through to you guys about how should company financials be seen, and exactly how they can benefit, and just how much returns can you get if you have that long term view of any company or a stock. Okay, so at the end of this presentation, I would like to mention some of the top stocks that are there in India. They are basically called blue chip stocks. They are those companies which are very financially sound, and they have very fundamentally strong holding in the market, and they have like immense amount of market capitalization. You can't just think about somebody as big as Reliance or you know Tata, for that matter, coming down, right? They are just so huge that you can't think about them crashing. So, and of course, they have a very good market reputation. And since they have a good market reputation, they obviously have to keep doing things in the same perspective so that they don't lose that. So, across different industries, I have listed down some of the top stocks that are there in the that are trading in the stock exchange currently. So, okay, so I've also talked about what are the characteristics of these blue chip stocks. As you can see, they keep giving you consistent returns. You can see from a trend perspective across the years, you will see how their top line and bottom line keep growing. And the risk involved is obviously less because these are established companies. If even if due to a recent market crash their prices may come down, but eventually within a period of a few months or a year, they will come back, and of course might even come back stronger, right? So also, a lot of these companies, how do they stay relevant is by building product diversification. What product diversification means is, for example, look at ITC. ITC was the Indian Tobacco Company, right? Now, tobacco obviously is a dying industry. Like slowly and gradually, with the amount of,
Ma'am,
uh, sorry.
yeah, ma'am, actually, we are quite running out of time, and we also have the Q&A session. So if you wrap
Okay,
it up.
okay. Yeah, yeah. I am just about to wrap it up. This is just the last slide.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, considering you, so once they saw that, tobacco was not something that they could keep earning the revenue on, they diversified into hotel management and the FMCG space. So this is what keeps companies relevant. So I've listed down some of the company names and their industries, in case you guys want to note. Okay, so quickly, the prerequisites when you start investing is basically you need to have a bank account and obviously some capital to invest, a PAN card, a demat account, and a stockbroker. stockbroker are these sites which you have now. You can start trading right from your phone, right? It's that easily accessible. So when once you log into any of those broking sites, they can help you create a demat account as well, which you can link to your bank account to put in money in your trading account for investing. And of course, all of this has to be linked to your PAN card, because any income that you generate from it can be taxable depending upon what extent it is in your income scale. We can have the question answer session now.
Before that, can everyone please turn on their cameras? We were thinking of taking a picture, screenshot. Whoever can, please turn on their cameras.
Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
So let's start with the Q&A round. Okay, the first question is from Chakshu. Is there a fixed amount of shares in the market of any specific company?
Sorry?
Is there any fixed amount of shares in the market for any specific company?
No, it's totally dependent upon the promoters of the company. So promoters are basically the founders of a company. Like in my example of Infosys, the 7 engineers who started their journey. So obviously they have certain, constituents of their company being directors and promoters and founders. So they collectively decide just how much liquidation do they want to make for their company, and that is what is then listed on the stock exchange. They still do not lose their majority shareholding, because so that they remain the sole decision makers of the company and not the retail investors.
Okay. So, and the next question is, how did the allotment of an IPO take place if the certain IPO is oversubscribed?
Okay, so as I explained, whenever an IPO is put up in the market and people like you and I opt for it, it is purely based on a lucky draw system. It's just luck, you might or might not get. But the time when it gets listed on the stock exchange is the day you get to know whether you got it or not. And of course, depending upon how much in demand is that stock, the listing price is determined. So I hope that answers the question. There's no like specific process of how that happens. You can't ensure that ये तो मुझे मिलेगा ही IPO. You can't do that.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Which is better nowadays, price action strategy or technical analysis? What combination of indicators is best according to you, which is also applicable in options?
Options. Okay, we did not discuss futures and options here. It's relatively more complicated. But then again, I feel that at the current stage where you're just beginning to learn, you should understand a company in terms of their fundamentals. Technical analysis is is another way of analyzing a stock, wherein you analyze the trends with the how the candlesticks are formed and the opening price and the closing price within a certain duration. There are a lot more technicalities involved. Of course, once you get an understanding of the stock market as a whole, you can try and learn the technical analysis also. It gives you a clearer picture of how the pricing happens. As I explained, the price is determined depending upon how much a stock is in demand and how much is in supply. So a lot of these aspects come into picture when you do technical analysis. It helps you make easier trades And I think it's more relevant when you're looking into stock markets from a trading perspective to have technical knowledge, not for investment so much.
On to the next question. Can I buy in NSE and sell in BSE?
No, I don't think that's possible. While you can, choose which stock exchange you're buying from, that particular stock, when you sell it, it sort of automatically sells in the same market stock exchange that you had bought it from.
And since we do not have much time, one last question. What thought process a stockbroker undergoes while predicting the graph of a particular stock price?
Sorry, can you repeat?
What thought process a stockbroker undergoes while predicting the graph of a particular stock price?
Like I explained, there are a lot of market news. Like as I explained, a lot of these news uh, changes the investor's perspective. So what a stockbroker does is he's not basically getting involved at all. He's just getting a brokerage from if you invest in the stocks that he is pitching to you, right? But how will he get you to pitch is if you suggest good stocks for returns. How they do that is to analyze, that's what the analysis part comes, where he's probably seen the trend of that stock over the years, maybe monthly or seasonal cycles of how it increases. There might be a particular time of the year wherein a company, like for example Diwali, like up until now Diwali was the time when people would buy extensively, right? So this is the time when the market prices of a lot of those shares which people buy go up. So maybe that's how they tell you the whether it's going up or not. But then again, I feel that you guys should focus more on understanding, not look at prices on a very short term perspective, but a long term perspective. That was my idea in the entire session.
Okay, so when we organized this webinar, our main aim was to make the students aware about the stock market, trading, and investing and everything. And I really hope that we were able to achieve that goal, complete
Yeah,
that aim. So,
I
ma'am,
hope
I
so.
would, yeah. So, ma'am, I would like to thank you on behalf of ECEL and NIET for taking out the time to come here. This event was a success and a whole lot of credit goes to you. We were absolutely delighted and glad that you were able to join us. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.